Hi, I'm Scott. I'm a linguist, and I'm a Dungeons & Dragons nerd. And I'm wearing a funny robe because I'm that kind of linguist. I'm the academic kind of linguist. I'm actually in the middle of writing a very long and complicated piece of research up. I'm kind of tired of it. I've been doing it for a couple of days now, and I wanted to take a break. So I'm making a little rant. This is about 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons and the things that bother me about it. Things have bothered me about it since the edition came out. I remember seeing the new books and being concerned that, oh, they're just turning it into a different way to play World of Warcraft or something like that. I don't play the online MMOs. When I do role-playing games, I do role-playing games with a pen and with paper and with character sheets and dice. And I don't like the technology kind of incursion there. It bothers me. But that's not all that bothers me, and I want to talk about some more of that. Mostly I'm doing this to get away from doing my research for a little while. Last night, I stopped writing for a while. I went and played some Dungeons & Dragons with my friends. We've been playing a different game recently. We've been playing an old game called Saga, which it's a role-playing game like Dungeons & Dragons. It's a different system. It's more role-playing heavy, which was really fun. My DM has been wanting to play 4th edition for a long time. We played a campaign for a while, and it was all right, but it had some problems to it. It was the first 4th edition campaign I'd ever been involved in, and it was all right. There were some flaws. The game was fun. We had a lot of fun together, but it was mostly the people that were there that were fun. None of us really came away from the game talking about the things that have happened in that campaign. We've played a lot of campaigns together as a group, and we always come away with some memorable thing that happened in the campaign, and we don't do that with 4th edition. It doesn't happen. We come away talking about the YouTube videos that our more distracting group member had brought up during the session, or amusing slips of the tongue that somebody made. But we don't talk about the events of the game. And that, I think, is the core problem, the big thing that is wrong in 4th edition. So let's talk about that. I grew up playing 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons. When I was 12, I was introduced to the game. My friends and I played for years and years. We played lots and lots of 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons. We made lots of modifications to the game. We rewrote rule systems, we redefined things. But I think that 2nd edition allowed for a lot of that, where 4th edition does not. But it's more than that. It's more than just the homebrewy feel associated with 2nd edition. Some other things bother me about that change, and I want to point some of them out. I want to point out some of the artwork in the old books and some of the writing in the old books and how that's different than the modern books, and what we can learn from that. I'm a scholar. It's what I do. I sit all day and I read old books, and I see what's different about them and what I can say about them. And I'm just frankly glad to be doing that with something that isn't the research that I'm doing right now. So let's look at this book, shall we? Okay. I used to spend hours poring over these old books. I loved these. I read them like a novel, cover to cover, many times as a kid, and I always liked the old artwork. So let's look at this picture here. What's going on? There's a story that's going on in this picture. We've got the party over here, and they're kind of scared of something that's happening. They're raiding a treasure hoard. This is a common event in a game of Dungeons & Dragons, and they're scared of whatever is attached to this. And it looks like it's this guy, and he's clearly bad. Look, he's scary, and the players over here are human. This is a normal event in a game of Dungeons & Dragons. It looks right, and it tells me a story. There's something going on in this picture that I get. Now let's look at a picture that has always irritated me from the new Dungeon Master's Guide. when I saw this picture for the first time, I actually laughed out loud that they had included it in the book. It's not a poorly composed picture. The artist did a decent job of drawing. Good Lord, it's like when I'm lecturing. Here we go. Okay. Let's look at this picture. Remember in the other picture, there was a big difference between the people who were obviously the good guys and the person who was obviously the bad guy, and there was a story being told. Let's look at this picture. Here, we have somebody who looks a lot like Satan. And behind him is a dwarf, probably. Neither of them look particularly scared of that rock rolling behind him. Yeah, the dwarf looks a little surprised. He's like, hey, I wasn't expecting that. But he's not stricken with horror at the fact that that rock is about to crush him. There's arrows whizzing all over this thing. But this looks like it's just another day at the office, and oh, something went a little bit wrong, and now they have to do something different than they would typically do. They have to run away. Oh, it's inconvenient for them. Firstly, I get that these are probably protagonists, but the feel of 4th edition is entirely wrong. And you know, I'm hating on the tieflings. I don't like them as a player race at all. They look like Satan. And I get that sometimes you want to play a character that looks like Satan and he's misunderstood or whatever. That's fine. I get that. I get that players like that kind of thing sometimes when they're 14. I did when I was 14. I'll admit it. You know, I was a 14-year-old gamer once. I loved things like the Dragonborn. I've gotten over that since, but I get that there's that kind of gamer. That's fine. What annoys me about the picture, though, is there's not really any cohesive narrative that got us to this point. Nothing really drives us to here. We're looking at this picture, and why are they in this tunnel? Well, they're in their tunnel. That's what you do in Dungeons & Dragons. They're not getting any treasure. They're not fighting anything off. It's just another day at the office in the dungeon. So that annoys me a lot. Let's look at some other images, though. Here we go. This is another great example of a storytelling image. There's a woman here, and she's got a giant at her feet, and that's not something we were expecting. That's bizarre, which is interesting because you don't get that feeling out of any of the pictures in 4th edition manuals. Everybody is looking stern or looking maybe a little bit surprised. Mostly they come off looking bored. There's nothing really interesting going on here. This woman looks determined. She's not making a super potent facial expression, but she means business. She's doing some posture, gesture kind of things that tell me a lot about what's going on here. She clearly expected to be able to hand this ogre this experience, and he didn't expect that. You look at the bottom of the picture, his club is all chopped up, his shield is all chopped up. There's a narrative that led us to this point. A fight went on here, and she chopped his weapons up to bits. She emasculated the heck out of this ogre, dropped him to the ground, and now he's at her mercy. She's got his nose ring. There's a story being told in that picture, an interesting story about combat, which is a big thing in Dungeons & Dragons. Dungeons & Dragons has always had this big combat element. That's an important part of the game. I don't want to say that it's not. It always has been. The focus of the game has shifted, though, from this more storied content, where we're interested in how this happened, to this. Oh, look, something dangerous is happening to these people. Why? I don't know. It doesn't matter. That annoys me. I think that some of the text in the book is illuminating as to the attitude of the writers toward the game. So I think this is interesting. It says more than just hack and slash. This is in the 2nd edition manual. As important as fighting is to the AD&D game, it isn't the be-all, end-all of play. It's just one way the characters deal with situations. If characters could do nothing but fight, the game would quickly get boring, like 4th edition. Every character would be the same, like 4th edition. Because there is so much more than fighting, we'll cover much more than simple hack and slash combat in this chapter. And this is the chapter on combat. They give you different options to run combat with. And yeah, hack and slash there, they're just talking about rolling the dice and waving a sword or a mace or whatever you happen to have. And there's a lot of combat in second edition. Something I should probably point out is my friends and I, when we played, we probably didn't play exactly the way everybody played. We never bought modules. We had some of the source material, but we would usually make our own campaign worlds. The onus was on the DM to come up with the story. We didn't want to play boxed games. We thought that sounded boring. So maybe I'm not the average gamer. That's, I'm aware that my opinion does not necessarily represent everybody's. And I know a lot of people like 4th edition. Here's another one that annoys me. These guys are poised over this breathtakingly beautiful scene. There's waterfalls and there's these endless ancient buildings beneath them. Look at their faces. Oh, look at that, another place. I wonder what we're going to fight here. I wonder if there will be any treasure. Oh, That's sad. We have this really amazing magical environment that they're in, and they're not at all interested in it. They're just concerned about where the next combat is coming from, is what I take away from that image. This one, I think, is a good counterbalance to that. This is from the 2nd edition Player's Handbook. There's a wizard here, and he's doing something cool with his staff, something lightning-y. But look at everybody's reaction to him. He is clearly proud of this. Look at his face. He's, yeah, look at me, I'm awesome. And everybody else around him, they look like more common folk, are looking at him and clapping, and oh my goodness, yeah, that is awesome. Look at you go, you're doing something amazing. That's the feel that I think Dungeons & Dragons needs. It's a fantasy game. There's fantasy stuff going on. Wizards are casting spells. But the reaction of the world to that needs to be, oh wow, that's fantastic, for it to be fantastic. Otherwise, it's just it's just ordinary. It's just what goes on. Here's another example, a counterexample to that from the 4th edition Player's Handbook. We have this party of characters. Again, I don't know what's going on. I don't know who the good guys are. I don't know who the bad guys are. Everything is red, and that's an attractive compositional element, but I don't know what's going on here. Somebody is casting a spell over here. Why? What led us to this scene? There's this fantastic scene, and I have no idea what's going on. It's not taking place in an inn. Nobody's showing off. It's not like that last picture. Are they trying to get treasure? Are they trying to get into somebody's lair? I don't know. It's red. There's a lot of red. Again, we've got Satan down here. He's probably a player character, but I don't know. Who's this guy? Is he good? Is he bad? Is he ugly? I don't know. He's ugly. But I don't know if he's good. He's fighting the devil. Does that help? No, because the devil might be a good guy. I don't know. There's a lot of compositional themes here that are interesting, but there's no story themes. There's no narrative themes to pull this scene together, and that's a problem that I see a lot in 4th edition material. Is the storytelling has disappeared for the combat, for the mechanic of the game. That irritates me a lot. So I want to look at this note on the, my robe is all kind of funny. I want to look at this note on the history of D&D from the 4th edition manual again. So they're telling us about what Gary Gygax did in the 70s, and they're telling us how it evolved. Dungeons & Dragons evolved from wargaming and miniature gaming, and so that's always been a part of the game. And again, this is where I differ from a lot of players, is I never really played with miniatures until very recently in Dungeons & Dragons. I played miniature games. I played a lot of Warhammer and Warhammer 40K as a kid. I liked that. I had a job, and the purpose of my job was to get me enough money so I could set a little bit aside for college and blow the rest on Warhammer miniatures. And I liked that. It was fun. I liked playing those miniature games, but they didn't need a cohesive narrative to hold them together. Sometimes my friends and I would attempt to craft a little, okay, so this battle that we're fighting will lead to this other battle, and if you end up winning against the orcs today, then you'll go on and you'll fight the Skaven next, and this is why. And we'd build systems of, our leaders would have renown or a war chest or things like that. But there wasn't a whole lot of narrative coherence, and there didn't need to be. The game was focused on the strategy of sending these two armies at each other and seeing how probability influenced that. That was a lot of fun. It's a fun exercise. I like tactical I like tactical miniature games too. I think that's fun, controlling one piece on the board and letting other people control the other pieces, and influencing what's happening in certain squares and seeing how the probability influences those things. The planning of that is fun to me. I like that. I don't like that when that's the whole game of Dungeons and Dragons. I like there to be narrative coherence, and it's not just why are you attacking? Why are we doing this? Why are we at this part in the game? What's driving us on? I have a friend who loves to DM in Savage Worlds. He loves to run Deadlands games, and I love his Deadland games. It's a ton of fun. He runs the modules in Deadlands, but I think that Savage Worlds and the team that works on Deadlands does some really good storytelling things to get us from scene to scene and to get us caring about NPCs, to caring about the fate of environments that are going on. That's a big part of the role-playing experience for me. That's why I play those games. I'm really interested in the storytelling and having an interesting story to talk about later with my friends. A story that we actively participated in. Maybe somebody royally screwed up something, and that'll be fun to talk about for a long time. Maybe somebody pulled off something ridiculous, and we talk about that forever. If you've seen on YouTube the movie The Gamers, that has a marvelous example of what I'm talking about in it, where the party sits down in the tavern, and the thief walks up to a guy at the bar, and he picks his pockets. And he did really well, so he wants to see what else he can steal from this guy. And ultimately, he ends up stealing the pants right off of the guy, and it's hilarious. I think that they did a great job of portraying the interesting storytelling elements of Dungeons and Dragons there. You don't get that really with 4th edition games. At least I haven't. Maybe it's just the group that I play with, but I don't know. It's a different group than the one I grew up with. This group is all about running games out of modules, and I moved away from home to go off to school in a far off land, and since then I've stayed in that general area, and I've gone to a different school, and I love academia, so I stay here as long as I possibly can, but there's a big difference in the way narrative is treated in the Dungeon Master's Guide of 4th edition. There's a note on challenges in the game, and I like this. It says a lot about what the people writing this were thinking. A good adventure, notice an adventure, not an encounter or anything like that, provides varied challenges that test the PCs and stimulate the players. Create different encounters that emphasize attack, defense. Hold on, attack and defense in an adventure. Wait, oh, okay. We're just assuming that by adventure you mean combat. That's what's going on. So we want to make sure that we're emphasizing attack for the attacking characters and defense for the defending characters. Wait, isn't there more to the characters than their ability to attack and defend? Not really in 4th edition. That's not really what we're interested in. It's there, but it's very backgrounded. And that annoys me a lot. I say that a lot, but there's just a ton about this edition of Dungeons and Dragons that gets under my skin because it's wrong, it's different. And some people grew up on this edition. I get that. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to say, oh, but 4th edition is what I know. It's how I came into the game, and that's fine. My wife, she came into Dungeons and Dragons. My wife plays Dungeons and Dragons. It's actually how we started dating. She wanted somebody to come and join a game that she was running. I had decided before that I had given up the hobby, and she dragged me back into it, and things happened from there. But she came in playing 3.5, that midway edition between 3rd edition and 4th edition. When I was in high school and 3rd edition came out, my friends and I were furious with nerd rage. We had played 2nd edition for so long, and we had this standing set of house rules that really governed the way that the game was played. And when third edition came out, we devoured the manuals as we read lots and lots of role-playing stuff. We read manuals from all kinds of different systems, but we read through these manuals and we were so mad because the focus had changed so much to the miniatures and the tactical combat. And granted, we were left behind. We had never really gotten into the player's option combat and tactics and things like that. We weren't very interested in that segment of the game. We were interested in the way the game was role played rather than the way the game was played. So we were maybe left behind a little bit by that kind of thing, caught by surprise, that had just been incorporated into the core mechanic of the game. So third edition pissed me off immensely. We started playing it a little bit, and then we played it more. We eventually went back to our modified version of second edition, continued tweaking it, but my wife, 3.5 was what she knew. That's the game that she knew. I told her stories about my old goes in second edition and how it was different than third edition and 3.5. But I played it. I played through third and 3.5, and I dealt with the difference in mechanics, and that's fine. And there were things that they improved and things that they monstrously and royally screwed up. But it's fine. Every system has its flaws, and that's okay. And then fourth edition came out, and I bought the manuals, the core 3 manuals, and I read them. And they, as I've already been over, they annoyed me a lot in a lot of places. But let's see. I actually have a set of notes to guide me through this. So battle maps when I played was a big deal as a kid. We never played with a map of the combat. We just, the DM would describe it, and we would sometimes lose the thread of where we were and what we were doing, but most of the time it was fine. Because it wasn't really about the combat, it was about how we had gotten there and how we were going to get out of there. In third and in fourth and in 3.5, it's all about the combat map and what the miniatures are doing and the tactics of that. So fourth edition Dungeons & Dragons is mostly a tactical miniatures game, and that's fine. I like tactical miniatures games. That's not Dungeons & Dragons. That's not the Dungeons & Dragons I play. And I'm old, get off my lawn. I'm willing to concede that that's okay. Maybe that's where role-playing is going. But it's not really role-playing. It's just a tactical adventures game. It's like Descent. I like Descent. I think it's a really fun game. But when I pick a character card, I'm not picking it for his motivations for exploring the dungeon or her fantastic backstory or anything. I'm picking it because of the numbers on the card. And that brings me to an important point about 4th edition. I hate these cards. I hate that Dungeons & Dragons became a card game. You have this very closed set of what is possible in a given situation. So yeah, I mean the spells in 2nd edition and 3rd edition and such were kind of like that. It was this little set of rules, and I'm casting a fireball. Well, every fireball works like this. But every fireball interacts with the environment around it a little differently, right? If you're in a closed hallway and you cast fireball, the fireball is really long, and it might be a really bad idea to cast it at something that's 20 feet away because you're going to roast the party. Heaven knows that happened many times when we played 2nd edition. It gives you this calculation of cubic feet to figure out how big the fireball swells to, but that takes too much time. We don't have the attention span for that today, and so it's just this burst weapon, right? It bursts to 3 squares away from it or something like that. And that's just silly because there's a little teeny bit of flavor text to that spell, but who cares? Who cares what the flavor text is? It could be anything. I could make it a monkey ball instead and have a horde of fearsome monkeys leap out and bite everybody and disappear in an instant. And have it be exactly the same, but it doesn't affect the mechanics of the game at all. The monkey ball could be a fun spell in some settings, but it's not in 4th edition. It's just a silly little thing. It's like my beef with the tieflings. It doesn't actually matter that they look like the devil, that they've got these horns, and that they're these tortured souls. Everybody plays the tortured soul character. I get that. That's fine. I don't really play those kind of characters anymore, but I'm sure at some point in my past of playing the game, I played a character with a twisted and dark past that nobody understood because I was a teenager, and that's who we are when we're teenagers. I get that. That's fine. It's part of the experience. Um, but it's just this little bit of flavor on the side of the character that doesn't matter for who the character is at all. Um, so you have this very generic fantasy universe too. Again, the pictures in the books tell me a lot that this is, what's going on here. Here's a guy, he's casting a spell, and there's red stuff and there's blue stuff. But why is there red stuff and blue stuff? And who's around him, and why is he casting those spells? Is he just doing it to look cool? Is he just posing for a movie trailer, or is there a reason? I don't know. I certainly don't know from the picture. There's nothing to help me here. There's no narrative coherence to this. To the story being told by this picture. It's boring. It's a special effect without a story, which, as George Lucas told us, is a pretty boring thing. And that's why his movies are so very boring as of recent. But where was I? I don't want to talk about Star Wars. I don't really care about Star Wars. So you have this very generic fantasy world, and you have magic that's going on, but why is magic going on? What is it doing? Is it interesting? Is it impressive? Not to the people in the pictures that I've shown. It's just de rigueur for them. They're looking at it and they're just all looking stern or a little bored or maybe vaguely surprised. You don't get the effect of in the game that wizard in the second edition manual. That picture captured my attention as a kid. So you get this wizard who's casting some kind of spell, and he's clearly just doing it to show off. The picture shows me that by his face, and everybody around it is loving it. You can tell by their faces and by what they're doing. There's a story being told by that picture. And Dungeons & Dragons is a storytelling game, or was before 4th edition came along. Now it's not so much a storytelling game as it is like an old penny arcade. Aren't you interested in why you're in this battle? Why you're casting fire magic? Well, I'm casting fire magic because he's immune to ice. That's all I really need to know. I'm not interested in any of the story that's going on around this. And that's fine if it's a video game, but Dungeons & Dragons is not a video game. There's been a big effort to make it into a video game, and that bothers me. I don't really play WoW or EVE Online or whatever the other ones that are popular now. Those are the ones that people in my gaming group play. And that's fine. They can enjoy that. I know that those are machines calculated to get me to spend my time playing them. They're not really trying to get me to pay attention to an interesting unfolding story. They're getting me to grind and to spend time on a subscription, and that's fine. It's a money-making business. The second edition manuals, I don't remember exactly which one, but in one of the second edition manuals, I remember reading as a teenager that TSR is a business out there to make money. For those of you not old enough to know, TSR is the company that owned Dungeons & Dragons before it was purchased by Wizards of the Coast. So that's fine. It's a money-making endeavor. I get that. I support it. But it's a money-making endeavor now just designed to get people to spend money on more and more books. It's not about crafting interesting narratives. It's about crafting a little bit of narrative that'll lead you from tactical map to tactical map. That bothers me. I don't like it. I don't like things that are different. Another thing that bothers me is these closed set of rules that govern various things. When I read the 4th edition books, as a linguist, one of the things that bothered me was reading that there are these fixed 10 languages in the world, and they don't obey the normal rules of languages. They don't change. They're these perpetual languages. I've gotten over that. I've grown as a person since then, and I get that fantasy worlds can have fantasy languages. That's fine. I don't like that there's this closed set of 10 languages and that a character can take the linguist feat enough to know all the languages in the world, except these ones that these particular monsters speak. which of course is what's going to happen. I always played the character who had high intelligence and knew lots of languages. It was just a flavor element for me. It was entertaining. Usually I made up a bunch of dead languages that my character knew so that I could hunt for those particular made-up dead languages, and the DM could tell me, no, it's not in the language of this ancient empire. It's in some language you don't know. That's fine. And again, that's flavor text. That doesn't matter. But it bothers me that there's this closed set. And you get the same thing with the skills in 4th edition. So that the skill set system is another thing that kind of annoys me. I want to read something from the 2nd edition Player's Handbook about the way skills work. So there are actually a couple of different ways to handle skills in this older edition. The 2nd edition manuals are a lot of optional rules, and this might work, and you might want to play it this way. People have liked playing it this way, but there are problems with both. There's a lot of that feel to this game. I want to give some of that to you if you've never read these books. So they're talking about, firstly, ways of handling non-weapon proficiencies, things your character is good at beyond fighting. Maybe you just want to say that the character knows what you know as a person. There are problems with this method. First, you probably know a lot of things your character shouldn't. Basic electronics, the components of gunpowder, calculus. You have a lot of knowledge that's not available to somebody in a medieval world or a fantasy medieval world. Likewise, there are things that a typical person in a medieval world would know that you don't know. You don't know how to make armor, skin a deer, salt meat. You don't know how to thatch a roof or read heraldry. These are things that people would probably be able to do in the D&D world that you as a person in modernity just don't know how to do. And that's fine. Your character is probably never going to thatch a roof. He might. He might be helping peasants repair the village, and maybe he's a paladin and a nice guy and wants to get down there with the common man and thatch roofs. He should probably know how to do that. So it lays out a couple of other systems. Maybe the character doesn't just know what you know. Maybe he's got some secondary skills. So you roll on this chart of secondary skills. This is the one that my friends and I often played. You roll on this chart, and your character has this in his background, and maybe you weave that into your character's background, or you pick one of these skill sets. Maybe your character is somebody who was press ganged onto a boat, and he knows how to sail or something like that. Then this looks probably more familiar to somebody who knows 4th edition. These are the non-weapon proficiencies. And you pick these, you have a set number of them that you know, and you pick a skill. So, I'm playing maybe a wizard character, and he's got the astrology skill. So I spend a couple of points on that, and now I've got a way to roll for that skill. When you do that, though, it can cause problems with the way the game works, and the book goes on to describe some of those problems. It tells us that non-weapon proficiencies allow characters to choose from a broad selection and define the effects of their choice. Like other methods, however, this is not without its drawbacks. Non-weapon proficiencies are rigid. Being so defined, they limit the options of the player and the DM. At the same time, there will be questions unanswered by these proficiencies where they're overly broad, and maybe you need something less defined. You need something more flexible. 2nd edition was all about acknowledging that need for flexibility in the gaming, and 4th edition is all about pushing that under the rug. I went and I played an RPGA game, which I will never do again. It was the stupidest game I've ever played. It was very much all of the things that I hate about 4th edition, where we got into one of the role-playing segments of the game, and it was just an extended skill check. It was so stupid. We actually, one of the characters role-played out very effectively, I thought, a bluff with one of the guards. And then he had to make his bluff roll, and of course he botched it. And the effective role-playing, the effective storytelling in the narrative no longer mattered because the roll hadn't gone well. Oh my goodness. That's just, why? Why would you ruin the game like that? Why would you make everything so dependent on the dice roll? I just, that ruined it for me. It's like in a video game. Some of the newer games, like, I say newer games, but when games went 3D, I remember Zelda 64, Mario 64, these kind of games, you run and run and run in an outdoor environment, and you run into a wall. The game world doesn't exist beyond this wall, and it's just the sky texture that your character's running against, and it's funny in a video game, right? You're just running against the edge of nowhere because there's just no program beyond that point, and that's amusing about games like that. My brain is a better computer than that, though. There doesn't have to be this boundary that shows, oh, you can't go beyond this point. This is a game. This is serious business. I can imagine beyond that. I can improvise. The DM can improvise, and we can tell a fun story like that. We don't have to be bound by those rigid borders of the game universe, which Fourth Edition is all about. In the first Fourth Edition game I really played, we were playing an updated version of a second edition campaign we had played with Planescape. And the DM told us we could play pretty much any character we wanted because it was Planescape. So I thought it would be funny to play a robot, to play a Warforged, and have him be very, very robotic in everything that he did. To have virtually no personality, which was my comment on how 4th edition works, that nothing has any personality in this game. So I look up the rules on how to play a Warforged, and I see a very, very stupid piece of text. The Warforged are robots. They don't eat, they don't breathe. But anytime that would affect the game mechanics, anytime you inhale a poison gas or something like that, that affects the Warforged character like it affects any other breathing individual. So you can have your little bit of flavor there. Oh, sure, your Warforged doesn't breathe, unless it needs to matter for the game mechanics. Then, of course, he does something like breathing. But why would you do that? Why would you ruin it? The same thing with instant death kind of things. There's a lot of that in second edition. The Sphere of Annihilation is one of my favorites. It's this sphere of negative zone. It's like the writing to the null file on your Linux system. It just those bits don't matter anymore. They go away. So if something contacts the Sphere of Annihilation, it is in fact annihilated. It ceases to be. It is no more. There's something equivalent to the Sphere of Annihilation, if I recall correctly, in 4th edition. I don't remember because I don't really care that much about 4th edition. But there's this Sphere of Annihilation-like thing. But of course, it can't have this insta-death feature because they've gone into the trouble of calculating the statistics of the game and knowing how your character should survive against an encounter of X level. If your character is Y level, that should work out in this way. They've done the combinatorics and the statistics, and they've worked all this stuff out. And that makes it incredibly dull. Because if you touch the Sphere of Annihilation, you take X number of points of damage. The danger is gone. I'm not saying that you can't die in 4th edition. We had a TPK last night. Technical TPK, or technically not, because one of the characters ran away with a few hit points left. But so I'm not saying it's impossible to die in the game. I'm just saying there's no danger in it. There's nothing at risk. I lose my 4th edition character, I just roll up a new one. I wasn't attached to him in the first place. Because when I wrote the character, this is my other big beef, and then I'm going to be done here. I hate character design in 4th edition. And here's why. In 4th edition, you pick a race and a class, and that's pretty much your character. And there's some sub-options in your class that further define you as maybe a summoning wizard or a bow-using ranger or a two-swords ranger or whatever you want to be. There's probably an option for it because there's 60 billion classes at this point and like 40 different player races that you can use. It's ridiculous. The combination of race and class and subclass defines your entire character. That's it. They've even written into it, okay, you want to play a more mopey, misunderstood character? These are the races you want to go for. These are the classes you want to go for. You want to play a more goody-two-shoes kind of character who's not a fish out of water, everybody likes him. Well, this is the combination you want to go with. And that's always been a little bit the case, but there's background that you would write. There's things that differentiated you from every other wizard in the game, every other elven wizard. Now And you're pretty much railroaded into this by the way the game is designed. So every race gives you a +2 to do 2 of your different attributes. Um, and except humans. Humans give you a +1 to 2 attributes, but you get to pick which attributes those are. Maybe you want a +1 to your intelligence and a +1 to your charisma or whatever. But nobody ever plays humans. So you have this campaign setting that is human dominated except the party. The party never has any humans in it. Why not? Because for any particular character class, there are 2 skills that will benefit you the most, that you want to be the highest. Everything else is pretty much dump stats. So you take their templatic set of ability scores. You don't roll for anything now because that would screw up the math and they don't want to do that. It's very important that everything conform to the statistical engine that they've built. So you take this templatic set of numbers, apply it to the ability scores in the way that it ought to work, and then you pick the race that has the +2 to your 2 most important ability scores. That creates your character. That's it. You're done. You've made a character. That character has no story elements to him. He's got some stats. You can put him on a tactical map, and he can play his Pokemon cards. He can play his little Magic the Gathering style spell cards and do things on the combat field. But it's not even vaguely interesting. Every character ends up being identical. If you're casting X spell that is a blast and rolls these dice, it's identical to every other character that can cast a spell that does the same thing. The four roles in combat have always existed. You've always had healers and tanks and casters. That's fine. I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with is the fact that character generation is just this algorithm. I remember reading in the 2nd edition manuals the dangers of min-maxing. Encourage your players not to just do this min-maxing thing. One of the things I think that lent itself very well to not min-maxing in 2nd edition was you took your 3d6, you rolled them 6 times, and you assigned those numbers to your stats. And maybe you weren't that rigid. Maybe you allowed somebody to make a list of 6 numbers and then pick the ones they wanted for the character they wanted. I like, though, rolling the 6 numbers and seeing what character I get. Maybe I get somebody who's utterly mundane and he just picks up a sword and a shield, goes into a dungeon. And he has an adventure. He's like Bilbo Baggins, who's an utterly mundane character who goes out and has this fantastic adventure and learns a little bit about what it is to be exceptional. And he doesn't need an 18 intelligence to do it. I think that's a fun exercise. I encourage everybody to do that at some point. Or to at least get away from the schlock of 4th edition once. Get into a game that actually is about the story and not just creating a pseudo-story for the sake of linking Tactical Grid 1 to Tactical Grid 2 to Tactical Grid 2B when when all the mooks or what are they called, the monsters with 1 hit points. That's utterly ridiculous that we actually have mooks here. I love the Savage Worlds systems, and I know that's about having mooks too, but Savage Worlds has an excuse. They start off by telling you that it's about making a cinematic story, and cinematic stories have characters that are important and characters that aren't. That you have stormtroopers in Savage Worlds, and I think that's great. I play a Savage Worlds game very differently than I play a 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons game. And both of those are very different than the way that I play a 4th edition game, which is I try to pay attention to the dry and stupid narrative that is the skill encounters between the tactical combat simulations. But I'm not involved in the story at all. I don't really care. My character might have quirks, but those largely are just an annoyance where before they were fun. So in the game that we were playing recently, we were playing in the Dragonlance universe, and I was playing a Tinker Gnome, and it was a lot of fun. Everybody always looked at my character with suspicion that he was going to blow something up, and of course, he blew stuff up all the time. Our party never got out of a situation, a city or a dungeon where a room didn't explode, and several times it wasn't my fault, and that was really funny because my Tinker Gnome could look up and hold his hands up. It wasn't me this time. I didn't blow it up. That was fun. We tell stories about that, about the problems of having that tinker gnome in the party, and the fun things that he did, and the problems that he caused. We don't do that with the Eladrin wizard that I played, or the dragonborn warlord, or the half-elven bard. I mean, they're just space fillers. They wear a costume. They play Magic the Gathering with their little card abilities. They roll a d20 every so often because the skill challenge demands it. There's no real role playing. Sometimes I try to get into the spirit of it and role play something out, and then I roll my dice and oh look, I rolled a 1. The role playing there didn't matter. None of it mattered. There's no real story here. Um, it's like in a way, the difference between the old Dragon Warrior game and Final Fantasy, those first two old 8-bit games. In the Dragon Warrior game, you have this box of things that you can do, and it's the same in combat and out of combat. And I think so anyway. It's been a long time since I played it. You can use your talk option. And it's dumb. Why would you do that? But the game rules were consistent between combat and non-combat. Whereas in something like Final Fantasy, you have an entirely different set of ways of interacting with the world, whether you're in combat or not in combat. And I think that's a little silly. Something like Savage Worlds I like. It has a rigid skill system, but there's flexibility built into it. The manual there will tell you about how to deal with that kind of thing. You have this skill system, but it's the same system in combat as out of combat. Your shooting skill and your fighting skill are just skills in the game, like your ability to do research or things like that. And then when I'm playing one of those games, if the characters are role-playing it and are doing an effective job, I don't generally bother them to roll the dice. If they're being reasonable about how their characters are researching some bizarre thing, then great. And if they're not, if they're just trying to phone it in, I don't care what their dice roll is, they're going to fail. If they have no idea what to do next and they're making the dice roll, and I'm going to give them hints as to how to do it, depending on how the dice roll turns out. Or maybe save it till later if the dice roll was abysmal. But the dice roll is not the game. It's a storytelling game. And I think that Savage Worlds handles that very effectively, where 4th edition just falls on its face doing it. It ruins the effect of it. It's dumb and stupid, and I hate it. I hate its dumb, stupid face. But I'm going to play this 4th edition campaign with my friends, because a big part of the Dungeons & Dragons experience has always been that there's a bag of Doritos, and there's a can of Mountain Dew, and there's your dice, and you're making dumb jokes, and you're referencing nerd pop culture, because that's what you do in a group, and you have a good time. That good time has nothing to do with the game. Maybe tangentially. It was awfully funny last night when we had that TPK, because we were playing the encounters in the wrong order. That shouldn't even be possible. I get that that's probably just an effect of a boxed set adventure, but we snuck around this town. That's another thing that bothers me about 4th edition is characters have to play this stealthy game. All of the early modules I've seen, the low-level modules, your characters are doing these stealth checks, and 2 or 3 members of the party have their stealth skill, whatever it's called, high, and nobody else does. And so you're just rolling the dice because you have to pick this thing up and roll it. It doesn't matter what the cleric gets. He's not stealthy. The thief is going to do the stealth encounter, and if the thief has to do the stealth encounter with the rest of the party, he's boned. It doesn't matter. The cleric is going to roll a 1, or the thief is going to roll a 1. It annoys me that leveling has become such a dumb thing in 4th edition. It goes to level 30 now, so your characters are gods at the end. It has no qualms with this. Your characters are just gods at the end, which is stupid. And this is another thing I think is handled wonderfully in the game like Savage Worlds. Your character changes and grows, and you get some more skills over time, but you're always in danger. the scenario is always dangerous. There are things that you're getting really good at, but other things that you're not good at all. So, your character has some kind of amazing computer hacking skill, or knows everything there is to know about the occult and is doing an investigate check. Yeah, you're the man. You can do that no problem. Whereas in 4th edition, it scales. So my 20th level wizard is just as good as my 1st level wizard at doing arcana checks. It's programmed so if this is a normal difficulty, he needs to roll about a 10. He has a 50% chance of doing it, even though he's this amazing scholar and has studied these ancient tomes all his life. And the same with the barbarian. He has the same chance of shouldering through a door, whether he's at 1st or 30th level. And yeah, there's kind of an excuse for it. The one at 1st level was a must-sealed door in a dungeon, and this one is made out of mega adamantium, because adamantium isn't good enough now. It has to be star adamantium from the astral plane, and so that's lame. But he has the same chance of doing it in either case. The game doesn't change. My character doesn't actually improve. Maybe some of the flavor text around him changes, but again, the fantasy element of it was never impressive. I ran a Hollow Earth game recently, which it takes place right around World War II. There's Nazis. It's Indiana Jones-esque. It's, again, another cinematic kind of system. Very, very given to storytelling. An excellent game. The players really, really enjoyed it. It took this very Lovecraft bent at the end. They were in the sunken city of Relay, and they were punching out Cthulhu with a stone giant. It was a lot of fun. It's been months, and people are still talking about the events of that game and their characters and the things that happened there. But the characters grew and got better at certain things over time, and so we had characters that were the go-to guy for certain skills. We had an actress who could flirt her way out of any situation, and that was hilarious to watch her role play that. Or we had this survivalist who had come into the game drifting up to a boat on a raft that he had made out of the frozen corpses of Nazis from another boat that he had been on. And that was hilarious, but he was our survivalist. It was great. And some of the characters were good at some things, and some of the characters weren't good at things. And that affected this story. Again, I never pulled out a tactical map for it. I never made the characters put tokens down on this map. They didn't care. They had played games where they played with the tactical map, but it wasn't about that. The game I was running wasn't a tactical combat situation. It was a role-playing game, a game in which the participants role-play. We told a story together, which, as I understand it, is a rather primary function of most role-playing games, where for 4th edition it is a secondary, tertiary, or perhaps even quaternary function of the game behind the dice mechanics, the card game, and being bored and looking up YouTube videos because you're not even vaguely engaged in the story. You're just casting the fire spell because the monster you're fighting is immune to ice. Why is he immune to ice? I don't care. Why are we fighting him? I don't know, because he's on the tactical grid, and isn't that what we do to things on the tactical grid? 4th edition, the manuals will hedge about this a little bit, but you can tell by the pictures, the way that they are structured. You can tell by the text of the way the book is written. Maybe I'll give a couple of examples of that too while I'm still doing this. We're talking about the character's class here. A class is more than a profession. It is your character's calling. Your class choice shapes every action you take as you adventure across a spell-tangled, monster-written, battle-torn fantasy world. Will you be a gutsy, youthful sword fighter, a pact-sworn warlock with questionable ties, a god-worshipping cleric who knows too much? Okay, see there, that makes me laugh. A cleric who knows too much. We had to make it a little edgier there. A little bit bigger, because your cleric just isn't enough. Another picture I want to show that I love from a previous edition of the game is this one right here. Here we have a cleric. Again, there's a narrative thing going on. He's in a graveyard. That's how we know he's a cleric. He's all by himself. There's all these zombies besetting him. We're like, oh no, what's he going to do? But he's got this brave expression on his face, and everything around him is recoiling, and it should be the other way around, right? Well, it's not. And the picture begs us to question why he's not. Well, it's because he's got this power of his deity that he's calling on to rebuke these abominations. Makes the scene interesting. Makes the scene kind of cool. You don't get that in 4th edition. Instead, you get these schlock images. And I'm not questioning the artists' ability as artists. They construct beautiful images. They are well composed. They do not tell a story. I had another good example. This one, I think, in the player's handbook. Unless I've shown this already. No, I haven't shown this one. Okay, beautifully composed picture. We've got some nice color things going on. But again, I don't know what's going on here. I think I know who the good guys are here. I don't really know who they're fighting or why they're fighting. They're outside. Maybe they're at a cave entrance, and maybe following the logic of the last picture, the cleric is in the graveyard because he's fighting evil. So maybe the adventurers are at this cave entrance outside because they're fighting something. It's not really defined in the image. There's no narrative cohesion there. And while the artists are skilled, you don't have narrative coherence behind their artistry. And I think that's a reflection of the game material and what the game is supposed to be now. It's the same thing in the text of the manuals. You have interesting scene elements, but you have no interesting narrative elements. You have nothing to really build a narrative on. You have something to build an extended skill encounter between tactical combat simulations. I like the things between tactical combat situations. I'm okay with that. Again, I like Descent. I think that's a fun game. I think Descent is a fun game for entirely different reasons than I think Dungeons & Dragons is a fun game. I like Dungeons & Dragons because it's a storytelling game, or it was. Once upon a time, when I was but a lad, we told stories together. I'm not one of those role players who plays the games where you never take out a dice. You know, I'm not about that. I like the chance element. I like building a narrative around a weighted random number generator, as was in an XKCD comic a long time ago. That's fun for me. I like the random element. I like that things don't always play out exactly the way I was planning them. But I like the idea that the dungeon master and the players are working together to weave an interesting narrative that everybody can have a fun time building and recalling later. The stories that my friends and I tell about the games that we've played, and we've played quite a few sessions of 4th edition now, probably about as many as this group anyway has played of 2nd edition. That was one of the things that this group did when we first joined it. We played a 2nd edition game together, and I brought my wife in, and I had her read all my old books and said, "Look, honey, this is how it was in the old school, which is great." And she read them and was like, "Oh, wow, there's not a coherent system here. There's not a D20 mechanic." And I said, "Yeah, I know, but this is how the big boys play. You know, we know where the tables are, and we've memorized some of the arbitrariness, and we can calculate THACO and things like that. There's a little bit more math, yeah, but it's not actually more math. It's just a lot of addition and subtraction of this modifier that you attach to the D20 roll. And it's not like those modifiers matter anyway, because when you're level 1, it's a +6, which is kind of high, I think. And when you're level 30, it's plus 165,000. But it doesn't matter because it all comes down to whether or not you get a 10 plus on that dice, as to whether you hit or properly negotiate or whatever it is. And story be damned. Doesn't matter. Who cares? Just as long as the tactical simulation turned out well, and I got to play with my cards, and it just annoys me. There's so much that annoys me. I could sit here and rant about this probably all day, and I shouldn't, because again, I do have writing that I need to get to. I gotta write about linguistics, but so much about 4th edition just bothers me because it's not Dungeons and Dragons anymore. They're writing a different game. They're writing a different way to play a tactical game because maybe you don't want to play Descent. Maybe that's fun. Maybe you play 4th edition and you love it. Maybe you have no sympathy toward what I'm saying because you're not interested in playing a game about storytelling and narrative cohesion and things like that. I think the main purpose of what I'm saying is to introduce to people some of the reasons that that older gamers are put off by 4th edition. And maybe not all of them are. Maybe I'm in the minority even. I don't know. Nobody I know except our current DM really likes 4th edition. And we're playing it to humor him because he ran a really great Saga game recently. So okay, we'll play your 4th edition. That's fine. You've earned it, man. We'll play it. Maybe some people like that. Maybe secretly everybody just wants to play a tactical simulation. Maybe you get off your computer, you're done with World of Warcraft for the day, so you want to play it with pen and paper. But even that is going away. It kind of annoys me that you make your character in D&D Insider and you roll your random number generator computer dice and you have your simulated tactical battle mat. And there's value to that. You can play the game even if your buddy is way off across the country or something like that, which is going to happen in our game. One of my friends is moving out of state, and we want to keep him in the game, so we're going to Skype him in or maybe do Fantasy Grounds or something like that. I don't know, but I don't like that the whole game is a video game now. I like the pen and paper aspect of it. I'm a Luddite in that sense, and my children, who will of course grow up playing Dungeons and Dragons, will grow up playing pencil and paper Dungeons and Dragons, probably 2nd edition Dungeons and Dragons. I've seen a little bit about 5th edition at this point. My friends are avid gamers. Our DM used to work at TSR long ago. He's a very avid gamer, and that's great. So we've heard a little bit about the 5th edition. We're thinking about maybe running some play testing. I don't know. We'll see what happens. We'll see how long this 4th edition kick lasts. I've seen some good things about it, though. I like the look of the new character sheets. I like that there aren't any cards. That makes me happy. I like that I'm not playing Magic the Gathering if I'm playing 5th edition. I hope. Maybe they just haven't made that part yet. I like that it looks more like the character sheets that I'm more used to, that it looks like a 2nd edition or a 3rd edition, or at least there are elements of those in there. My friend who has played much longer than I have and grew up actually playing later versions of 1st edition, says that it reminds him a lot of a 1st edition kind of setup. So maybe we're going back to very much the basics here. And that's maybe a good thing. Maybe we're getting back into the storytelling. We're getting back into the role-playing part of the RPG rather than the MMO part of it. I'm not hating on those games. I'm okay with them. People play them. I get the allure. I haven't sat down and played them because I'm afraid that it'll be like crack and I'll just lose myself to it. Because it's designed to get me to spend my time playing it. It's built for that. It's not built to tell me an interesting story or to make me think or to do much more than chat with some friends about how everybody is a noob. It's built for me to spend my time on it. I hesitate to use the word waste because I know a lot of people love these games and people get married in them and whatnot. So there's probably some storytelling there. But I don't like to see the game that I know that is about storytelling and narrative coherence evolve into a tactical simulation, so that when people look for a role-playing game, and Dungeons & Dragons is the touchstone of role-playing games, I don't want to see people know that only as a tactical simulation game. I think that would be a great loss to us all. I think that role-playing games are of tremendous benefit to society. One of the great human skills, what sets us apart from the animals, other than our ability to communicate in languages, is our ability to picture the world as it is not, our ability to understand how things might be. I think that is a great defining human characteristic, and I think that we start to lose and cheapen that when we lose the narrative elements, the role-playing elements of role-playing games. So that's my rant. I actually intended this to be much shorter. And if anybody ever listens to this, I'd love to know what you think. And if I post this on YouTube, I'm sure that I'll get plenty of angry vitriol at the bottom that's just for the sake of trolling, just for the sake of being vitriol. So you know what? Have fun with that, because it's part of the narrative of modern life. We role play that you have an opinion that matters, and that's fun. So thank you for listening to me.